All of the biological systems are irreducibly complex in that they rely on multiple components to function and are integral to other systems. Let's review some of these organ systems, and I'll illustrate some of the remarkable design features and interesting examples of interconnectedness, starting with the skeletal system. The adult skeleton contains about 206 bones, varies a little bit, 206 to 208, depending on your discussion. Some bones protect the delicate internal organs, like the skull protects your brain, the vertebral column protects the spinal cord, and then your thoracic cage, your ribs protect your heart and lungs. It also works together with the muscular system and nervous system to accomplish movement. Your skeletal muscles, like the quadriceps and hamstrings of your leg, shown here, contract and move the leg bones when instructed by a signal from the nervous system. Numerous features of the skeletal system point to design, starting with bone architecture, which makes your compact bone stronger than granite. It is composed of concentric rings called osteones, as shown here, that are built using the calcium mineral called hydroxyapatite and is reinforced with collagen fibers, a protein. This design gives compact bone a load-bearing capacity that is 4 times that of concrete. A block of bone, half the size of a computer mouse, can support 10 tons. Well, another example of skeletal system design is seen in the joints, which have been intensely studied to improve robotic designs. In 2013, the Journal of Mechanisms and Robotics published an article by Stuart Burgess describing the development of a robotic joint based on studies of the human knee. Well, the study and use of biological designs to develop and improve our own technologies is called biomimicry. And biomimicry is a huge part of engineering today. We can point to lots and lots of things that were developed or improved upon after studying God's designs. For example, Velcro was developed after studying the way stickers would hang on to hair. Swimwear is now designed based on the friction reducing properties of shark skin. There's now shark skin swimwear. Humpback whale fins have inspired modifications to turbine blades. They're now making adhesives that were designed after studying how geckos' feet would allow them to stick to walls through electrostatic attraction. They've designed buildings after studying termite mounds and how termite mounds are able to dissipate heat from those structures. And as I said, robotics has drawn significantly from the studies of both vertebrates and insects. We can point to a good number of examples of God's designs being used in our own technologies. Well, the researchers that designed this robotic knee described the significance of the development this way. They said the bio-inspired joint mimics the 4-bar mechanism and the cam mechanism of the human knee joint. The bio-inspired design has the same desirable features of a human knee joint, including compactness, high mechanical advantage, high strength, high stiffness, and locking in the upright position. These characteristics are important for robotic limbs where there are often tight space and mass limitations. Well, this article, again published in 2013 in the Journal of Mechanisms and Robotics, was published by Stuart Burgess, but in 1999, Burgess, one of the lead researchers of this paper, who was a professor of engineering and design at the University of Bristol in the United Kingdom, published an article in the Journal of Creation describing the irreducible complexity of the knee joint. He describes it this way. Opponents of neo-Darwinian evolution have argued that it's impossible for the knee to evolve because many biological systems require an irreducible number of parts for the system to have any useful function. The concept of irreducibility requires a set of characteristics that must exist simultaneously. Such characteristics are termed critical characteristics. The advantage of identifying critical characteristics is that they give an indication of the minimum quantity of design information that must exist simultaneously in the genetic code for a mechanism to have any useful function. The irreducible mechanism of the knee joint is shown to contain at least 16 critical characteristics, each requiring thousands of precise units of information to exist simultaneously in the genetic code. This demonstrates that the knee could not have evolved, but must have been created as a fully functioning limb joint from the beginning of its existence. Well, did you know that your bones are also being constantly remodeled? Your bones are being constantly remodeled. You don't have the same bones today you did when you were younger or when you were lighter. Cells called osteoclasts eat away at bone. Other cells called osteoblasts then lay down new bone. This remodeling is done to strengthen bones when new stresses are being placed upon them or when they're repairing bones. So, for example, if you start engaging in a physical activity, a sport that is starting to put new stress or different kinds of stresses on your bones will be remodeled, strengthened to handle that new level of stress. For example, rock climbers. If you ever have a chance to look at a rock climber's hands, there's some really pronounced bones growth that you will see in a rock climber's hands because of the stress. You know, people used to say, people that are big would say, I'm not big, I'm just big boned. Well, it's true, but you're big boned because you're big. You put on a lot of extra weight and your bones will be thickened or strengthened to handle that additional weight. Just yesterday, I saw a post on Facebook. Forgive me, I saw a post on Facebook of the skeletal where they had analyzed the skeleton of a medieval archer. And they were illustrating how significant the difference is in that medieval archer's skeletal framework because of the massive stress that's put on the body when pulling a really strong bow like that, especially when you start at a young age doing that kind of pull. Yeah, so it's very interesting. The bones will be remodeled to handle the stresses that you place upon them. The body is just amazingly designed. I mean, the healing processes alone. I mean, you think about it. We have a body that heals. You cut yourself, and before you know, that cut just closes up just perfectly, and sometimes even stronger than it was before. Well, the skeletal system also works with the circulatory system, and the immune system are responsible for making new cells for both of those. Now, the production and turnover rate of cells in the human body is astonishing. To appreciate this, consider that your body uses up and remakes about 2.5 million red blood cells per second. 2.5 million red blood cells per second, and that's just one cell type. The next highest turnover rate in terms of a cell type in the body is epithelial tissue, the skin. Because of the skin of not just the outside skin, but the inside skin, because of the interaction of that skin with the surrounding environment, there's a high turnover rate of skin. And the greatest is in the interior of the stomach. The skin that makes up the interior of your stomach, the stomach lining, is exposed to hydrochloric acid on a regular basis. And so there's a high turnover rate of some of those cells too. Well, in 2007, scientists at the Columbia University Medical Center discovered that the skeletal system also acts as an endocrine gland, making and secreting a hormone called osteocalcin. Now, osteocalcin is made by bone cells, those bone cells called osteoblasts that also make new bone when activated by insulin, the main anabolic hormone of the body. And insulin is made by beta cells in the pancreas and regulates the metabolism of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and does so by promoting the absorption of glucose from the blood into muscle and fat cells. Osteocalcin also increases organ sensitivity to insulin, thereby increasing metabolic rates in muscle and fat. It also increases beta cell proliferation in the pancreas. It increases insulin production. Plus, recently, additional studies have suggested that osteocalcin acts in the brain to stimulate neurotransmitter production and in the testes to increase testosterone production. The skeletal system is also an endocrine gland, for goodness sakes. The interconnectedness of the various body systems just blows you away. Well, the nervous system is a massively complex network of interconnected cells that transmits information between the brain And the sensory organs, like your gustatory or olfactory or your sense of touch, and also to your voluntary and involuntary muscles. This requires close to 45 miles of nerves running through our bodies. 45 miles of nerves. Well, the main functional cell of the nervous system is a cell called the neuron, which forms these communication networks by connecting with other cells through these long extensions you see here called axons. These are neurons, and you see a little tendril-like things growing out from one of these. Those are the neurons. It's a long thread-like structure that will attach to other cells. They either attach to other neurons, like in the brain, it's a massive interconnected network of neurons, or they will attach to muscle cells to stimulate their contraction. Nerves, which is what you see here on the image on the right, that is what a nerve looks like. Nerves are bundles of these axons. So that's a scanning electron microscope image of a nerve, and all of those little strands that you see there in that nerve are all individual axons. And remember, there's 45 miles of nerves running through the human body. When you multiply that by the number of axons found in a single nerve, you really get a sense of just how massive this communication network really is. Well, there are a total of about 100 billion nerve cells, these neurons networked together in the human body. 1 billion can be found in the spinal cord alone. Incredibly, the axon from a single typical neuron forms between 1,000 and 10,000 connections with other cells. A neuron has just one axon that leaves it, but it branches. A typical neuron will branch, forming at between 1,000 and 10,000 connections with other cells. And these connections, called a synapse, are one of the most amazing things about this system. Notice in this diagram on the lower right there, that is the synapse, where a neuron, in this case, is connecting to another neuron. But notice that there's a space between the neurons at the point where they connect. The two neurons are not in direct connection. There's a space between them called the synaptic cleft. And what happens when a nerve signal comes down the axon and reaches the axon terminal? It triggers the release of neurotransmitters. A chemical that is released into the synaptic cleft must travel across that gap and is picked up by receptor proteins on the receiving cell, which will then trigger another nerve impulse if it's a neuron that's connected to, or a muscle contraction if it's connected to a muscle cell. But consider how fast this takes place. That a signal has to travel down that nerve, down that axon of that neuron, release neurotransmitters that have to travel across the synaptic cleft, are picked up by receptor proteins, and then trigger another nerve impulse or muscle contraction. Consider how fast reflexes occur, and you'll get an understanding of how fast this process happens. I mean, reflexes are incredibly fast. You think about it, like when you touch something hot, or you touch something sharp, or you almost get poked by something and you reflex away from it. Well, one of the reasons why reflexes are so incredibly fast is that your brain isn't actually involved in the decision. Your brain doesn't decide what to do in a reflex. When you touch something hot, the signal from that hot thing that you touched doesn't go all the way to your brain, and your brain make a decision and then jerk your hand away. Your spinal cord makes a decision about what to do. The information just goes to your spinal cord and then back, which is why reflexes are so incredibly fast. So to sum up here, with 100 billion neurons in the body, that means there are at a minimum 100 trillion of these connections we call a synapse. However, the brain takes the synapse, the number of connections, to a whole new level. Now, the brain is one of the hardest working organs in the body. It is served by more than 10,000 miles of blood vessels and incredibly, uses 25% of your total oxygen and ATP that you make. So it's the total amount of oxygen and the total amount of blood sugar that your body delivers to cells is used just by the brain, and yet it weighs only about 3 pounds. So it's an incredibly small percentage of your body, but uses 25% of your oxygen and energy for its processes. Incredible. Well, it's designed to regulate most of the body processes through an incredibly complex network of something like 86 billion interconnected neurons. Now, that's almost as many stars as there are in the Milky Way galaxy. There's 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy, and there's 86 billion neuron connections in the brain. Consider that. However, the brain does not have typical neurons that only make those lowly 1,000 and 10,000 connections like your typical neuron. Some neurons in the cerebral cortex, called Purkinje cells, make up to 200,000 synapses each. So the total number of neuron connections, those are synapses, in the cerebral cortex alone is estimated to be between 60 and 240 trillion. Now that's some kind of amazing machine right there. Well, Dr. J. Weil, who has a PhD in nuclear chemistry, describes the brain this way. He says, there are more neuron-to-neuron links in one single human brain than there are electronic links in all the computer systems in the world. In addition, the brain processes information significantly more quickly than does the most sophisticated computer. Neurologists, together with computer scientists, have estimated that the brain can perform in 100 computational steps what it would take the most sophisticated computer nearly 1 billion steps to accomplish. Sir John Eccles, shown here, is an Australian neurophysiologist who won the Nobel Prize in 1963 for his work on the synapse, said, we can only explain the evolution of the human brain using imagination. Listen to this. He says, while recognizing that much is unknown or only imperfectly known, I have been able to unfold the fascinating story of hominid evolution of the human brain using creative imagination restrained by rational criticism. Well, as a special note, though, John Eccles, one of the world's leading neurophysiologists, after a lifetime of research and scientific publications culminating in both the Nobel Prize and a knighthood, which is why he's called Sir John Eccles, he ultimately concluded that only a divine creator can explain the existence of the human brain. He also concluded that life could not originate from natural processes alone. You know, I've seen many testimonies come like this from people that are advanced in their careers in science. And I've often wondered, though, whether or not it was their experience in science over those years that ultimately led them to this conclusion, or whether it was just that they didn't admit to it until they got far enough into their career where they couldn't be hurt by it. Because today, you admit to a belief in creation, and you're in a scientific industry or science education field, you will destroy your career. If you even challenge evolution, not even belief in creation, you publish challenges to Darwinism, to evolution itself, you will ruin your career. So I think many of these scientists perhaps may already believe or believed earlier in their life, but didn't admit to it until they were of retirement age or far enough in their career where they couldn't really be hurt by such admissions. I don't know, but I've heard several of these kinds of stories. Well, the human eye is arguably the most complex organ in our body. When you consider how difficult the task of providing vision really is, the eye stands out as an extraordinary example of design. It is so complex, in fact, that even Darwin recognized it to be absurd to suppose it could have evolved. In his book, On the Origin of Species, in 1859, he says this: to suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for emitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, that it could have formed by natural process alone, I freely confess, absurd. It seems absurd in the highest degree. However, in the same chapter of his book, Darwin went on to explain how he believed the eye did evolve, and ultimately how the absurdity was just illusory, an illusion of absurdity. But his example of evolution of the eye amounted to little more than just illustrating numerous eyes that were at different levels of complexity. Some organisms don't need a complex eye. Some organisms just need to sense light or not, whether it's light or not. Others need a more complex eye. You don't need an eye that can see like an eagle can if you're living in murky water and can only see 5 feet. So he just pointed out eyes of different levels of complexity and said, look, evolution. There you go. There's eyes of different complexity. But in Darwin's day, they did not understand how complex the eye really is. No camera can come close to capturing the visual detail of the human eye. We all know this. We've been to scenes, mountainscapes, beautiful sunsets, and you want to take a picture of it. You want to take a picture of that beautiful scene, but you know you can't. You know that the camera that you have will not capture that scene because the camera does not have the capability that our eye has. In fact, if the human eye were a digital camera, it would have 576 megapixels. The most advanced camera, the DSLR camera, has only 80 megapixels and costs $34,000. Well, the eye has been fitted with an automatic focusing system better than any camera. Your eyes are fitted with muscles that allow you to simultaneously jump almost instantly from one object to another and lock onto it, a process called the saccade movement. To focus on an object, the cornea and the lens bend the incoming light to focus it on the retina in the back of the eye where the photoreceptors are found. To do this, the lens is fitted with muscles that rapidly alter its shape instantly, focusing on objects at different distances, and this process happens simultaneously in both eyes. In the retina, there are specialized sensory neurons called photoreceptors that detect light. There are over 10 million of these photoreceptor cells packed into the retina to a density of about 200,000 per square millimeter. And there are two types of photoreceptors called rods and cones. The cones, shown in red there, reside mostly in the central portion of the retina and allow us to perceive fine visual detail, and were designed to sense the three primary colors, red, green, and blue, which is what all of our television screens and projectors are made out of, RGB. You have cone cells that detect red, you have cone cells that detect blue, and you have cone cells that detect green. And it's a combination of these three colors that produce all of the millions of colors our eyes can perceive. Like 10 million colors are produced by combining the various densities of those three colors. The rods that shown in green here are in the outer portion of the retina and allow us to see in dim light. These photoreceptor cells are incredibly sensitive and can respond to light far below our own technology. Rod cells can be excited, in fact, by only one photon of light. Our eyes are, in fact, sensitive to light over a tremendous range of 10 billion photons down to 1. But the rod cells, although very sensitive to light, do not detect color. So if you've ever noticed, in a very dim light environment, all you see is grays. You don't see colors in dim light because you're only seeing with the rods at that point. Well, each of these minute photoreceptor cells are vastly more complex than our most sophisticated computer. When light is detected, the information is sent to other cells in the retina for pre-processing before it's even sent to the brain through the optic nerve. 10 billion calculations occur every second in the retina before the image even gets to the brain. Werner Gitt describes the processing power of the human body. He has a doctorate in engineering and was the former head of the Department of Information Technology at the German Federal Institute of Physics and Technology. He said this: without a doubt, the most complex information processing system in existence is the human body. If we take all human information processes together, the conscious ones and the unconscious ones, this involves the processing of 10 to the 24 bits of information daily. This astronomically high figure is higher by a factor of 1 million times greater than the total human knowledge of 10 to the 18 bits stored in all the world's libraries. The human eye, in particular, is just amazing. It's actually part of the brain. The human eye is basically an extension of the brain. The human eye. Amazing, marvelous engineering.
The human eye moves about 100,000 times each day with automatic focusing. and can handle 1.5 million simultaneous messages. The eye is also self-cleaning with built-in wipers and cleaning fluid. And the eye even has the amazing ability to assemble and heal itself. Furthermore, God has designed the human eye to distinguish millions of colors, and his mind to appreciate the rich spectrum of beauty seen throughout creation.
Most people don't realize this, but the eye is part of the brain. It's an extension, a bud in the embryo that buds off the brain, and there's a little window that develops in the skin called the cornea of the eye. Isn't that great? The eyeball is located precisely where a clear window develops in the skin, so we may look through. It's sensitive to light over a range of about 10 billion to 1. That is from the brightest thing we can see, maybe a sun-drenched snowscape, down to as little as a single photon of light. That's our smallest unit of light. And of course, everywhere you look, the focus is automatic. And the two eyes look at the same spot wherever we look. It's like somebody with a pair of 6 guns that can fire the guns, and everywhere they shoot, the 2 bullets make 1 hole. Instantly, everywhere. And that's what our eyes are doing. Everywhere we look, they converge in the same point. If they were off by just a degree or so, you'd see double. Everywhere I look, I see overwhelming evidence of the handiwork of God, and surely, when man denies that, he's without excuse, just as Romans chapter 1, verse 20 tells us.
Certainly without excuse they are.